order at 6:33 p.m. This is a regular meeting for the month of January for the Co-op Budget Committee, which normally occur on the fourth Thursday of each month. The agenda was posted more than 24 hours in advance on the SAU41.org website, at the SAU office, at HBMS and HBHS. I would like to introduce myself. I'm Darlene Mann, Chairman of the committee, and the members present for tonight's meeting are Lauren Ridstrom, Matt McGuire, Brian Rader, Tom Enright. Holly Babcock is representing the school board as a non-voting member this evening. Tonight we're missing Dave Blinn, Raul Blanchet, and Cindy Van Conant with excused absences. No members of the administration are here with us this evening, and we'll just go off on our own. So if you could just join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on. We had Dave scheduled for our meeting observer this evening, but since he's absent, we'll look to Tom for that role tonight. Thank you. Moving on to the approval of minutes for the December meeting, I'll take a motion to approve the amended minutes that for the December meeting as they were distributed.
So moved.
Second.
By Brian, seconded by Lauren. Any questions, input? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amended draft minutes? Opposed? Abstention. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1 with Tom abstaining. Well, this hasn't happened in a long time. We're up to the public input section of our agenda, and there's a member of the public. So, actually, I do, do I read them? All right, well, you're the only member present. We have some kind of rules for public input, but we're just so excited to have somebody.
Well, hopefully I don't break any of them. So, Madam Chair, thank you for recognizing me. As you know, I had
could you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry, Peter D'Agostino, 9 Lewis Drive, Brookline. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
So I sent a communication trying to get a copy of the Excel document that was used during the co-op budget meeting a couple months ago, call it November-ish time frame. And you said I had to, come before the meeting, before the full body to request the document. So that's what I'm here to do. Really, what I need is just a calculation off of the Excel, and I just don't have all the formulas plugged in. So I don't know if that's something we could do, or if the committee, or the board, could provide me a copy of that Excel.
Okay.
Or whatever works really for them. I'm just trying to come up with, as you know, you were present when I was at the public hearing for the apportionment formula, and I'm trying to come up with another proposal, and just hamstrung a little bit by not having access to all the formulas. As you know, you pull one lever and they all spin around in circles. Mm-hmm. So that's really the reason to come tonight, is just to get that information in whatever form is appropriate and reasonable. I just need to be able to use that document either here at the meeting tonight, or if I can get it emailed to me so I can make my calculation.
Okay, so you did, thank you for coming tonight, Pete. You did send correspondence to me addressing access to the document, and we spoke at that afterward at that meeting. I think my correspondence to you, I can read it to the committee, said that I should have shared it with everybody, but I'll pull it up. So my response to Pete was, well, his formal request was to ask for a calculation over the phone or access to the document. And I asked that he make your request to the Budget Committee as a whole, because there's a practice of the Co-op Budget Committee for individual members to not address individual requests for information. It allows all Budget Committee members to be aware of any data requests. And I said, if you prefer, I would forward your request to the committee, and we'll address your request as correspondence at our next meeting. So,
That's what gets us here.
right, I hope you can appreciate this practice as it is intended to avoid miscommunication, confusion, and the perception that information is being shared in anything other than public session. I can send you that email, Matt. I can send it to everybody. And so what I would say to you, Pete, is that when we have Excel spreadsheets and things like that, they're considered working documents and essentially proprietary documents of the committee itself. So we don't share them with the public, and we don't post them. And but we did post a PDF of that file. So
But the document was for the full board, correct? Because it was used at a public meeting.
It was discussed at a public meeting, but it's an Excel.
But the actual Excel was used at the meeting for
the Excel
discussion.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Because it was a working meeting, and it was a working document of the committee.
Correct. Right. So my understanding of the public records law, and I have it, I can read it to the board if you'd like, is once a working document is shared with the quorum of the board, it is then a public record. And then additionally, there was some case law cited in the RSAs in which if there's a more convenient form, the body must provide it.
Okay, well, if you're going to make a right to know request, you need to submit that in writing.
No, I'm just saying those are the parameters I understand for getting the document. I don't know what a right to, if there's
okay, well, it's my understanding as working documents, they're proprietary, and even though they're shared, the Excel file itself doesn't need to be shared. A PDF was posted to the website. Okay,
so is there a way, how can I get the calculation? So that's why I came here tonight, is really at the end of the day, I don't need your document. I don't, you know what I mean? I don't want to mess with the formula. I'm just trying to get to a calculation, and it's a little bit tricky when, I want to be respectful of the board and all the work you guys do, and so, I don't necessarily need your document per se, but the function of the calculation resides within this board, and I need help making an alternate calculation. I don't have all the tools. So what would be the most appropriate way to be able to get a calculation?
I don't know what it is you're trying to calculate, so
I'm looking to propose an alternate formula to the apportionment, and without all of your data that this board has, it is difficult to piece those together.
Well, the data that we use to calculate apportionment is shown in that PDF. So you have the value.
Well, it's the raw data, but I don't have all the formulas, I guess is what I mean.
It's simple addition and subtraction and algebraic calculation applying like 95% to formulas. So I don't want to get, public input is intended to be input and not like a back and forth of how we do that and how we negotiate through doing it.
Right.
So I would say, thank you for your input. Okay. We will take it up. We can opt to discuss it as a board or not discuss it as a board.
Sure.
And then.
And again, so I guess my public input is just, and maybe for the board to discuss is, how can I get a calculation done for me, access to the document, whatever the case may be, whatever's appropriate. I'm just trying to find the right way to do that. And if you say there's no right way to do it, I understand completely.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Maybe that summarizes it, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks.
Okay,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, I'll proceed with the, actually, I skipped the agenda adjustment portion of the agenda. So if anyone has any agenda adjustments at this time.
Yeah, I think we should discuss providing calculations or some sort of tool for doing calculations, given that the apportionment's coming up.
Okay, so I can add that as an adjustment in addition to the general business section of the meeting. Okay, so we'll get to that as we work through some of these items. So the first item is a review of the draft warrant. I shared with everybody the draft warrant that Kelly provided to us. I'll just kind of go through the articles in order. It's Article 1, which is the third year of the HESA agreement at $81,139. Article 2 is the operating budget at $23,499,072. Article 3 is the SAU budget of $910,255. Article 4 is the athletic expendable trust at $67,000. Article 5 is $200,000 for the facilities trust. Article 6 is $25,000 for the special education expendable trust. And Article 7 is $100,000 for the contingency. So it's a pretty straightforward set of articles. The total of the warrant, will be $24,882,466. Again, there are no surprises with any of that. We came to a really, worked through the budget diligently with the administration, so it's pretty straightforward for this year. Any questions, requests for changing in the order? So articles are funded in the order that they're approved, and so I think that's why the board chose. And I think we do have to put collective bargaining agreements first.
I really don't know how that, I would assume it was just.
Okay. So that's the warrant that is going to be put forward for the March meeting. And seeing no other questions, we can move on to preliminary tax impact. I had hoped to have, the next item is the preliminary tax impact. I had hoped to have a summary of all of the kind of budgets of kind of where they all stand, and unfortunately I don't have that put together yet, as different bodies are working toward finalizing budgets and whatnot for their public hearings. So actually we should probably have a revenue, I shared revenue with everybody, which is an integral part of calculating what the impact is, and we're looking at an estimated revenue of $2,075,862, which is about $200,000 below where we are for this year. So that reduction in revenue has an impact. One of the other areas that affects the formula as we work through apportionment is the state aid. And I mentioned in an earlier meeting that there was a change to state aid anticipated for FY21. I'm just going to pull up one of my adequacy documents. If you just give me 1 minute. So for next year, the total amount of adequacy and retained, the adequacy aid, retained grant, and whatnot totals just shy of $6 million for the two towns, compared to this year, which is 5.4 million, essentially. So there's an extra $600,000, and this is predominantly due to something called disparity aid, which was approved by the state legislature. And what that does is provide, in this case, additional adequacy aid to Brookline, which totals about, in total for the entire K-12 district, all K-12 schools, is about 1.2 to 1.3 million. That gets split between the elementary and the co-op, and that ends up being about an additional, it's not split evenly, but it's about additional, close to evenly split, so it's about an additional $600,000 on the co-op side of the aid. So that brings Brookline up to $3.5 million in state aid, because they've also had their stabilization grant funded at 100% as well. So those are two additional elements compared to last year's aid. This year we'll see full stabilization, and then next year again sees that same full stabilization, and the as of right now, one-time disparity aid. Should the legislature take it up again, I don't know if they'll extend it or not, but right now it's a one-time aid for FY21. So with that additional aid, assuming the apportionment formula that we have in place right now, or we'll continue with the dollar shift, we would have, let me get to the right. We would see the budget apportioned at 52.7% to Hollis and 47.3% to Brookline. And I'm sorry, did I say 56.7 and 43.2?
You said 52.7.
Okay, I'll get to the 52 in a minute. It's actually 56.75, 56.8 and 43.2. Hold on a minute. I'm sorry. You go back. Let me get my colors in order. Okay. It's 52.7, 47.3 net apportionment between Hollis and Brookline. Hollis at 52.7, Brookline at 47.3. After the application of state aid, it would be 56.8% to Hollis and 43.2% to Brookline. I can put that in a chart for you, Matt. So you can. And what that ends up netting in the grand scheme of things, when all is said and done, why is this not my current? I'm sorry, I need one more file. Sorry. I think I forgot to save a file. So Brookline has about a 6% reduction in the tax rate, and Hollis will be looking at about a 3% increase in their tax rate. Preliminarily to be finalized at the public hearing, and for the public hearing, and then finalized after approval. So it's an interesting distribution of how the rates fall, with a reduction for Brookline and an increase for Hollis.
Is a lot of that just due to the Brookline getting that extra money?
It is
right?
due to them getting the extra money.
So for us, this extra revenue coming in.
Yes.
And a lot of that's just the one-time deal. Then we're back to
the
other way.
Yes.
So it's kind of a I want to say false sense of what the real numbers are.
The very temporary reversal.
Because if it doesn't continue, then that amount of money isn't there, and it'll make the increase
seem larger.
And the next budget for FY22, assuming there was some kind of an increase. But
that's the disadvantage.
So it is. It's an advantage and a
revenue.
disadvantage. The disparity aid was calculated. There were two forms of it. Two parts to it. One was based on free and reduced price lunches, and the other was based on the equalized value per student. And if it ended up being less than $1 million per student, there was a sliding scale of, I think, how far you fell short of the $1 million per student to determine the amount per student that was then allocated. So, yeah, I can try to find, I'll see if there's an explanation of it online and share it with everybody, because it is interesting. It is and again, with the change to the stabilization grant and pushing that back up right to 100%, not just, jumping, back in 4% increments.
Like 96% or
no,
something?
it was
Or
down
a lot
to
lower.
88.
Oh, was it?
Yeah,
That
he would have been
far?
heading
Okay.
down to 84.
Okay.
So,
Did I hear you say the stabilization grant will be fully funded for 2 years? Or
it's
just
fully
for-
funded for
Yeah.
infinity until the legislation changes it.
Okay, so it'll.
So
okay.
that part should remain.
Until
Well,
another,
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
for a little
we
while.
can't count on anything.
No,
No.
but
Yeah,
for,
no, the legislation
Yeah.
on that was just
It was
a
just,
permanent
they're just
change.
putting it back and they're
They were
not going to
putting
be
it back and they're not
taking
changing
it back down. And how much?
For Brookline, it's in I believe it's around 750,000 in total.
In
shared
total,
between. I keep
okay.
looking this way when we
Yeah,
talk
might-
about the districts because
In
Matt's the
total.
chair
yeah,
of
they
the.
might be able to
But
quickly
that's not
figure
the
it out.
difference,
School
that's on the 88 to 100, that's the total.
That's the
No,
total.
that's the total.
I have one more.
I'm gonna dump.
Think about where that file is. Hold on a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here it is. So stabilization for Brookline is 758,524, and the disparity aid is 1,267,159. So that's just shy of $2 million. No, is it just over 2 million? Nope, just over 2 million. $2,025,683.
Those are just
So.
Brookline's numbers?
That's
Or for
that's
the
Brookline
quote?
in total, not split between the two districts.
Okay.
And Hollis doesn't receive disparity aid.
Hollis does not receive a stabilization grant, nor does it receive disparity aid.
Just hate to ask, but here, just read those numbers again.
Sure.
So I,
Stabilization for Brookline is 758,524.
and grant.
Disparity aid,
Oh.
1,267,159.
And that gets applied after apportionment.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm just clarifying for myself.
Yes, no, that's fine. So what I'll include, we can probably move right into then, is the public hearing document, the next thing. Metrics for the public hearing. So I typically include for the annual meeting, I see I have it here as well, a chart that provides an overview of what the tax impacts are. So I will include that and then work with Kelly to get the Brookline School District information, and I verify the town information with Tad Putney in Brookline. The county information is available, and I verify that with him as well. And then I work with, I have the Hollis side, but I'll, double, triple check with Tom Ian on all of that. So we'll have that updated. But as we work through the public hearing, any other questions on the preliminary tax impact or aid? Okay. So moving on to the public hearing presentation, as I mentioned in my email, I did not have time to update the entire presentation, so rather than put out something that was half updated, I gave you last year's presentation for reference. So as we work through it, the agenda for the evening, a summary of all of the articles. I go into a pie chart that talks about the budget distribution, how it's split between salaries and benefits, student services, bonds, general education, things like that. The kind of structure of that chart doesn't really change much year over year, so it looks pretty similar. I have a chart that shows the inflation the budget trend over we're up to 12 years now, and a line that adjusts it for inflation, and talk a little bit about what those differences are. So over X period of time, we've seen a percentage increase in nominal dollars of one thing, and in adjusted for inflation, a different percentage. Talk a little bit about student enrollment. What we're currently seeing is relatively flat enrollment over FY 20, 21, and 22. A slight dip based on NASDAQ for 23 and 24. And then in FY 25, NASDAQ is projecting a shift back up to kind of our levels today, which go from like 1252 to 1235, 1232, 1233, 1221, 1209. We all have the NASDAQ data. And then it pops back up again.
District level is going.
So what's happening, what they're then showing in FY 25 is we're starting to see the Brookline enrollment age up into the co-op, and we see an increase, you know, from 1209 to 1252 in FY 25. Sorry.
Just for reference, for like FY 20, we have 578. By FY 25, 660 is what they're showing.
Brookline.
Yeah.
What did you say, 528?
We're at 578 right now. So FY 21 jumped to 611, then 643, 652, 658, and then 660. So 60, like 80 plus kids. If, you know, and this over history tends to kind of be pretty accurate. And I think Hollis is similar to this as far as the percentage increases. So there's a lot more kids headed towards the co-op.
And then as we look at the enrollment composition between the two towns, what's happening until you kind of all those additional students head up is that we've seen a relatively even distribution, like 51-49 is where we are now, like 51.5, 48.5 between the two communities. And what's happening until we get to FY, say 24 and 25 is we're going to start to see that shift take place where Hollis is gaining a little bit in the percentage distribution to about, really quickly. Up to 53%. Now I know those couple of percentage points don't sound like a lot, but when you're apportioning and it's predominantly ADM, it ends up having a significant impact with just even a half a percentage point shift. So if we're looking at 2 to 2.5 percentage point shifts, it does start to make a difference. So I'll talk a little bit about enrollment, composition, talk through the state aid levels that we're seeing the reduction on the co-op revenue side, but an increase in adequacy for the reasons we just discussed. A little bit about how what we collect in taxes is less than what we identify in the budget. A summary of, in dollars, of amounts to be the budget less revenue yielding an amount to be apportioned, and an overall tax effort, and then a little discussion about how the apportionment percentages work out, and then estimated tax impacts by town, and a tax impact summary. And then we open the floor for public input and work through the articles with the tax impact per article. I identify, when we got to the operating budget, some key budget changes. We have no bond this year. Kind of just introduce and talk through each of the articles. So it's really not, it's a pretty standard format, and I do have a calculation of, I believe I have to have a calculation of, no, I think the 10% limitation has to be at the annual meeting, so I don't have that yet. That'll be determined once we recommend the budget. So that's about it. I'm not sure if anyone thinks there's any other information that needs to be included anything that should be removed, anything that should be presented in a different way. I'm happy to hear anybody's input. It's pretty.
I think it's a good format.
Okay, thank you. Matt, did the Brookline one kind of?
Yeah, if you're interested, I could forward you that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So there might still be a couple little minor tweaks between that and our
Yeah.
real meeting.
I know I add a few more, I have a few different charts that I add at, for the town meeting, but, the school district meeting, but that's about it. Okay, so I'll proceed with the updates to the presentation and get that out to everybody before the public hearing for input, because I would appreciate everyone reviewing it with a very careful eye, because believe me, I opened it up and went, are you kidding me? That was a little like FY19 should have been an FY20. So I'm like, a year later, it's staring me in the face. So I appreciate everybody just checking those kinds of things, and it just.
You always do a great job, Darla.
You think you
Yes.
catch them all, but sometimes you just miss them, so. Okay. And if anybody thinks of anything that they, think is important to add or whatever, just let me know and we can work toward including something. Okay. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, Kelly isn't here joining us this evening, but I did share with everybody the results that were shared at the school board meeting last night, and right now I will have these with me at the March meeting, as will Kelly, because we will undoubtedly have a question about this, and these will be, I think, the last results we see before the March meeting, because we won't be meeting in February. Or I'm not sure if you'll have an update.
We meet in February. I'm not sure if we have an update on it, but.
Okay, so if there's an update in the board package, we'll have February's with us.
But you guys don't meet in February.
But right now, we're looking at an expense underrun of $682,000, a slight revenue. We'll get additional revenue of $125,000, which would lead to an unreserved fund balance of just shy of $810,000. And assuming our articles pass and everything is funded appropriately with the maintenance trust, the athletic trust, the special education trust, the contingency, and our retained fund balance, that would bring the 810 down to, that's $534,000 in reductions, and the fund balance return to taxpayers would be about $276,000. I think we had originally targeted around $300,000, so 276 at this point in the year is a good place to be. The underruns on the expense side are due mostly to hiring and interim positions, things that were unfilled, tuition savings, some unfilled stipends, lower than anticipated special education costs, some savings in administrative salaries with some new hiring, against hiring savings, unfilled positions in the facility side, lower than expected special ed transportation, lower than anticipated health insurance costs. So things look to be in pretty decent shape. The encumbrances are in place, and meaning that we've anticipated spending for the remainder of the year, school year. The other piece of information that was shared with the school board was a summary of the expenses for the turf field construction. And that basically reflected an underrun in costs of just shy of $73,000. So I know there's additional work to be completed, but one of the questions I asked Kelly, and this is the reason why I'm glad Holly's here tonight, is to give me, since she wasn't going to be here, an update on what the anticipated use of that $73,000 was. If you recall earlier in our conversations when Andy has joined us, we made it very clear that any underruns we would expect and anticipate being returned and paid toward, go toward paying down the balance of the bond. As we do have a prepayment feature with the bond as it stands today. I'm not sure actually if it's going to be refinanced. I believe they plan on refinancing it. We would lose the prepayment function, but we would, having that extra money would enable us to basically return more to the taxpayers if we applied that to the bond payment. So what Kelly explained to me was that there were 3 points under discussion with the board, which Holly, you can enlighten us on a little bit more, but they basically boil down to putting the money toward the debt itself, putting money toward bleachers, or some gravel parking lot, or.
So I think those 3 things were still on the table as of last night, although I do think the gravel parking lot is probably off the table. I don't think that's something that, due to, my understanding is due to like supervision of it, and it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense at this point. But I do think bleachers are still on the table for the board, in conversation with the board. They're looking into really like used bleachers, because bleachers are quite expensive.
They are quite expensive.
Right. So they are looking at that, but I'm sure that the board will have a conversation about those 2 choices.
Mm-hmm. Was there any conversation about the fundraising?
There's money in the HBL debate, so there is money for, could be used for bleachers, could be used for lights. So we haven't really dug into that. It hasn't been on our agenda as an item. Last night was the first update for us on the actual underrun, if you will.
Right.
I mean, we do have to spend, there's about $34,000 worth of expenses that will come in the spring, but that's before the under, you know what I mean? Like that's already there. So we haven't quite spent all of what we need to spend to complete the project, because there's some punch list items.
Sure.
But that still leaves the I thought it was like 73,000.
Yeah, just about.
I
just
don't
shy
have
of
it in front of me.
73.
So
72,781.
So so obviously those punch list items are expected to be $34,000, and that's the anticipation. So we won't really know for sure.
Well, we'll continue to monitor that as the spring rolls around, and maybe have a further
We haven't had a
conversation among the board. I know where Lauren stands on this.
No, I gotcha.
So.
I can see it in his eyes. We haven't had the board has not had a conversation about what to do with that money. That has not been on our agenda. We have not talked about that yet. So.
Okay, good. But I'm glad to see that the summary was included with the financials.
That was the first time. And we tend to get our information, digest it, and come back.
Sure.
So.
Okay, sounds good.
But I'm hearing you loud and clear, Lauren.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything I can bring back to the administration about the results? Seeing none.
Happy it was under.
Yes, under is it's a good place to be. I wanted to spend a couple minutes just talking about some pending legislation. I reviewed some of the items, and thankfully, for the last couple of years, I know I've mentioned a couple of different co-op initiatives, and there's nothing that's co-op driven. Sometimes it was related to dissolution, and there's nothing that's specific to any cooperative school district. There are items like some hazing legislation. There's legislation regarding extending student services and special education costs through the age of 21, so up until 22 essentially. Right now it goes to 21, so we're responsible for special education costs for students through the age of, up until the age of 21. This legislation would extend it up until the age of essentially 22, starting immediately. So I would have to talk to Bob about if we had any costs rolling out of the budget because we were anticipating students leaving. I thought we had that in this year's budget, but I didn't think we had that in next year's budget. So if that were to be put in place, that would have a budget impact on the budget that we're looking at for FY21, because we were seeing some savings in that specific category of expense. There was some information about a school marshal program that would allow someone other than a police, someone who's trained as a school marshal, to carry weapons on school grounds. There was decreasing the use of styrofoamware, hazing legislation. Unfortunately, I had left my note on this at my desk. But again, nothing. I think the biggest one for us was really like that special education
22,
one,
yeah.
and. I think that's it. That's all that's coming to mind. So, Brian, if you could help me kind of keep track of some of that stuff, if you don't mind, because you are always really good about.
Well, I have been in the
diving
past,
in.
less so
let's
recently, but
just jump in.
that's fine.
There's a little
Yes.
less to track, so I
Yes.
would appreciate
That's
some
fine.
help
Yep,
just
will
kind of
do.
keeping track of some of those items. But again, nothing that seemed really. You know, there are always pages and pages and pages. Like I was up to page 18, and just there was a lot, but those weren't all education. That was all initiatives across the state. So those are just a few of the high points. So at this point, I have nothing else on our agenda. We're way ahead of schedule, which doesn't happen very often, especially at this time of the year. So we'll take up, Brian, your request to address the request that Pete had.
Yeah, so I'm wondering what would be involved in providing, or what would be involved in providing some sort of a tool that could allow people to make some sort of evaluations with regard to potential apportionment formulas. What would be involved in doing that, and is that something that we could realistically do?
Isn't it formulaic? So I'm confused as to what the data is that people don't have.
So the question then would be, it comes down to student enrollment, the data, the property assessment data. The things that we have now, which makes it tricky, is the 5% capital part, because you need some insight into the budget to do that one.
That's already
on.
That's already on the PDF.
Yep.
All of those things are there.
And I would, because I haven't looked at doing it myself, so I would like to ask, what are the aspects that you're looking for, if possible? I can understand.
Okay, Brian, we've had public input,
Yep.
and this is time for the board, our committee, to discuss it.
Yep.
And so I can't open up the discussion back to the public at this point. I'm just trying to.
So my recollection is from the last couple times we've gone through this apportionment, when I tried to crunch the numbers myself, it's
Yep.
all available. It's just formulaic. So I get confused as to what we want.
Where would a member of the public go to get our ADM numbers?
They're on the PDF.
They're on the PDF, so all the numbers are on the PDF.
Yeah,
But let's say they weren't on the PDF. Where would you go to the
You can go
Department
to the
DOE,
DOE
the
and the
DOE,
GRA.
so it's all on the DOE, it's on the DRA, all those numbers, our equalized value numbers, all of that.
There's an
is on the
equalization
DRA
survey.
and the Department of Revenue and the Department of Education. So all of that can be found with a search on those sites. But you've also provided it all on a PDF.
Well, the current data for FY20 is on that PDF.
Right.
And does that include the state aid figures as well? Right?
And the budget.
And the overall budget
I'm
numbers?
trying to pull, I can't, of course, I'm like trying to pull up the file and can't find it right now. But I will pull it up and just double verify it.
Yeah, now having tried to do this myself, I don't know what would be involved, and it's
Yeah, no, I
difficult to
understand.
ask
Right.
when in the middle of a meeting. So I wasn't aware of this issue coming up before the meeting.
And I always, you
Yes.
know how many times I've opened this file
Yep.
and like, just give me a second. Okay. So yeah, it has the budget, the co-op revenue, the amount that gets apportioned, the net capital item, the remaining operating budget. So it breaks out the capital piece, the operating budget piece.
Mhm.
ADM, and with the split between Hollis and Brookline, the percentages, of like how they calculate out to percentages, the equalized value, the percentage distribution, the 95.5, the resulting budget, you applied then the capital piece to the capital dollars. It gets subtraction and addition subtraction to get to the assessment. I have out a breakdown of the total assessment per student for each town, the distribution, the aid.
To have a student enrollment
I
per
used
town?
ADM.
Well, yes.
For
Has the
it's-
percentages, or does it have the numbers of the
It
students
has
too?
both.
Okay.
The local assessments, because equalized value and assessed value are two different things.
Yep.
So the assessment that you would use to calculate a tax rate,
Mhm.
the assessment per student, I'm sorry, the net assessment, like the result after you subtract everything out, the actual dollar value that gets assessed, the assessed values that are anticipated, the percentage distribution, and the calculated tax impact. So it's really kind of
That does
all
sound pretty
there.
comprehensive.
And this is
Where-
posted on the SAU 41 website
Yes, it was
underneath
in-
districts, co-op school district, budget committee.
It's where, it's under the minutes from the workshop.
Okay.
So if those I'm
Okay.
not sure if they're
Okay.
posted, they're probably posted for both boards, so they're probably in two places. It's
Right, so
probably
that would be under
the
districts,
easiest way
right.
to find it is under the school board, because
Right.
it's just more direct, and then there's a budget committee piece.
And that meeting was in November of 2019.
Right.
So
Yep.
it would be under the minutes there and the PDFs there. So it's there.
All right. I'm satisfied with that.
Okay. All right. The next item on the agenda is a review of the calendar. So we talked about that next, which meeting is Monday and Tuesday of next week?
So,
That's the Brookline Town meeting.
Brookline
So
Town meeting, It's
two-
Monday and
I
Tuesday.
mean,
Public
next
hearing.
week.
so 127 is.
127 and 128 is the Brookline
Brookline
Town
Town.
meeting. The 29th is the apportionment meeting.
Mm-hmm.
That's for high school.
That's at the high school at 6:30.
So is that, I guess that meaning, are we gonna, as a,
No, we are not.
Or-
We're community members,
Okay.
or members of the legislative body for that meeting. We're not sitting in
Okay.
front. The school board is running that meeting.
We're not, okay.
No, we're not.
Alright.
Okay.
We didn't the last time either.
No, I don't remember.
You know what? We talked about this at the last meeting, and I was driving home. I'm like, oh,
Yes.
no, we didn't sit up there. I was a counter.
Okay.
So I said, nope, we weren't sitting up there if I ended up being a
Alright.
counter. So, which is very stressful, actually. Lauren, have you been a counter
Oh,
before?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
I've
It's a little
counted
stressful.
before too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little.
I haven't done that yet.
And
Yeah.
Both the,
So,
So I don't need to tell you that I won't be available for that meeting.
no,
Okay.
dang.
We will miss you, though.
Yes, we
Thank
will.
you, thank you.
Yeah.
But I will be at the public hearing.
Okay, yes, and our public hearing is on the 5th, and
It's here, right?
it is here. And Matt, what else did we say was that week? Is that your deliberative session, the Brookline School
Yeah.
District deliberative
what-
session on the
Yes.
3rd?
What time is the public hearing?
6:30.
6:30, thank you.
just don't remember which, I
Brian?
think it was the third,
The 3rd?
yeah.
So the,
Right, because you said Monday was the Brookline meeting, right?
The
What?
In your
Brookline
calendar, you had
deliberative
the-
session on the 3rd.
Was on Monday the 3rd.
Give me just a second. I'm still putting in that one. Save that. And the Brooklyn deliberative session is the 3rd, yes, with a snow date of the 4th.
And then the SAU meeting
Yeah, an SAU meeting on the
is
6th.
on the 6th, I think.
Okay.
Remember.
And then I'll send everybody the dates for the Hollis Town and the Hollis School District meeting. There were some changes. Oh, next Tuesday, the 28th, is a Hollis School District bond hearing. The school district is putting up 2 bonds for renovation of the SAU building and a comprehensive capital improvement plan that includes finalizing some of the energy initiatives that weren't able to be completed with the last one. So
What's the
that
value
is,
on those?
I'm sorry?
What's the dollar value on
They
those?
come to in total about $4 million. And that's the 28th. And-
What's the rough split? Half? 2 and 2?
Yeah, about 2 and 2.
Yeah.
Mhm. It might be like 4.2 million, so it's like 2 and 2.2. Okay, I think that's it. Process observer.
Excellent, excellent. We haven't even been here an hour. It's hard to leave.
You're so kind.
It's hard to leave, but I'll manage.
I have to say, I appreciate these efficient meetings.
Well, I think that just speaks to, that how we worked through the budget itself. And, I mean, sometimes we are down to the wire, still negotiating and working through elements of the budget. And we really were able to, I think, we have a good budget. It's under 2%. I think the impacts are reasonable. And from like a tax perspective, it's unfortunate that, a tax rate perspective, that a 2% increase, less than 2% increase is unfortunately not yielding, fortunately and unfortunately, it's the aid and revenue which affect what the impacts are looking like. Fortunately for Brookline, it's -6. Unfortunately, it's a +3, even though we have an under 2%.
On the other hand, we would be glad to swap our 11 point something dollar co-op tax rate for your 6 something one.
Well,
and you can have the state aid.
You just need a bigger base. So that's what I can do about that tax
Yes, oh,
base.
absolutely.
Well,
We would gladly throw in the state aid for that 675 or
You're
so
all too kind.
tax rate.
So, well, if we have nothing else at this point, I'll see everybody over the next couple of weeks pretty frequently, and I'll take a motion to adjourn at 7:25 p.m.
Seconded.
Warren, by Brian. All those in favor? Thank you very much.
Thank you.